All right, welcome back, folks. And now we're going to go ahead and start a new project. So I'm going to go ahead and say File, New Project. You've done this a few times now, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to go for our empty project there, empty activity that is. And I'm going to say Next. I'm going to call this Trivia as such. Everything else looks good. I'm going to say Finish. And there we go. After a few seconds, we should have our project all ready to be worked on. Very good. Now, the first things that I like to do when I start any project, because by this point here, of course, we should know exactly what are the things we're going to be doing, right? So we understand that we need to do some HTTP request. At this point, that means we have to get the Volley library. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that before we forget. All right, so I'm going to go to App here, click on App. I'm going to say File, Project Structure, and then we're going to go to the App, go to Dependencies there. And here we are going to add a new library. So this is going to be the Volley library. So I'm going to say library, it's Volley, 2 L's there. And we need to go find the dub. Let's see, where is it? I'm going to find the dub. There we go, the dub smash. Okay, say OK. And there it is. I'm going to go ahead and confirm that is indeed okay. And it's going to go ahead and get all of the stuff done, build, and so far everything is good. The next thing we must do is go to our manifest file here because we know we will need the internet. So let's get that out of the way right away. So I'm going to say use permission, just hit enter and don't forget to actually close it. So there we go. We have use permissions for internet. That way we don't run into issues. Very good. So now that we have everything, at least the basics done here, we have our internet and we've added the Volley. In fact, let's go to main here, just make sure that Volley indeed is working. So there we go. You can see that Volley has been imported correctly. It's always a good idea to make sure that things are actually there. Now, the next thing we're going to do here, I'm going to go into our Java. So notice we have a few packages here, and the main package is, of course, is our Build Apps with Paulo Trivia here, which has our main. Very good. But what we're going to do inside here, we are going to create other packages so that we can organize our code better. So this is customary. It's always important, especially when our projects start growing in size and complexity. It's important to divide things up so that way we know exactly where the files are. So I'm going to right click, say new. I want to create a directory, but in this case, I want to create a package. So this is difference here. And the first one, I'm going to say UI for user interface. So in case we have some Java code we want to put that creates a user interface, that's where we're going to put. So say UI, enter. I'm going to create a few more. In this case, another package here. And I'm going to say data. So this is where all the data classes are going to go. A new one here, package. I'm going to say model. So this is where we're going to put classes that model after data, right? So in this case, question would be a class of a model type. Okay. And I'm going to put a controller here. So new, I'm going to call this controller. So if we have controllers, that's where controllers are. And the beauty here is that because this IDE, again, is a good one, each time we create those names, look, controller, look what happens. The folder changed color. So that is very handy. It's not necessarily important for the functionality of the application, but it is visually appealing for us as we develop things. So we know, for instance, this is model, looks like a little table there because that's a model. We have data, just normal one, UI, normal one. But controller, you can see it changed the color and we have that little nice tool there. Okay, so that is very helpful. Very good. So we have all that ready. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a singleton. Remember from the previous lectures, we talked about singletons, which allows us to minimize the creation of unnecessary object in memory, especially when we're talking about HTTP requests and so forth, because those requests are indeed very expensive. So I'm going to create a singleton here. It's going to be pretty much the same as we had before, but this one is going to be more complete and we're going to use a different way to include it in our application. So inside of our controller here, I'm going to right click. I'm going to say new. It's going to be just a Java class. So let's call this AppController. Okay. And I'm going to make it superclass, meaning this AppController is going to extend the Android application as such. The reason why is because I want to make sure that I'm able to also override certain methods that come with Android application superclass. Okay. I'm going to say okay, and there we go. Very good. Now I have the code already, so I'm not going to bore you with all of that. So I'm going to copy all the code that I've already written and put it all here. That way we don't have to go through the whole thing again. So there's the code. Let me get rid of this. I think that is not necessary. There's our code there, and everything looks great. Again, notice it's pretty much the same as the controller. I believe was my singleton that we created previously. Okay, so again, this allows us to make it so that this controller here, AppController, first of all, it's going to be visible everywhere in our application. But for that to happen, we will have to do something in the next few minutes for this to truly be something that can control the entire application. Okay, but again, going through this, you can see it's pretty much the same thing. We have this tag here. It's not necessary, but it's used in this case to get the name of this class so that when we're debugging or logging things, we can just pass this tag and then it will know exactly where the error or where this message is from. Okay, the message that we are logging out. Okay, so we have that app controller here. Now I comment this out here because it's not necessarily at this point, because the whole class itself is going to take care of instantiating a new instance of it. So we can leave it as it is, like we did before. We had that if statement there. Okay, but that's fine. We don't have to add that. I just put it there so you see that it's possible to add there. But what's important here on create, this is where we actually get that instance that we have in memory and set it up, right? Because we say my instance now is going to be equal to this instance that we have created. And we have the get request queue here, which you remember, we usually use this inside of our main, right? Before we created the singleton class, but now it's here for obvious reasons, right? Because we're trying to abstract out all of this logic from user interface, from controllers, from other places in our application. Okay, and just returns the request. I commented out the image loader here because we're not going to be using that, okay? Now we have this add request queue. That's the same thing as we did before. It goes ahead and adds a request so we can now start extracting the JSON and so forth, okay? So as you can see here, this one is the same name, but it's an overloading function because the difference here is that we have different parameters, right? This is 2 parameters, this is just 1, okay? We also have another one here called cancel pending request, which we are not going to be using, but it's nice to have it there. All right, very good. So we have our app controller here, which is going to govern the entirety of our application, the whole project, which is awesome. Now, how do we make sure that this indeed is known in the Android realm in our application, that, okay, this app controller here, whenever I call this, it's actually going to get the only one instance that is for the entire application? Well, to do that, we have to add this inside of our manifest. Remember again, the Android manifest is what governs everything. So anything that we want for the whole application to abide by, we need to tell it. In this case here, we go to Android manifest here. Just inside here, we're going to say Android and say name like that. And the moment you do that, there is indeed the connection that we can add here. So just hit enter and it's going to go ahead and give us controller, app controller. So now it knows exactly that app controller, we're telling it indeed that app controller class that we created here, it's going to be governed by the entire project that we're creating here. Okay, very good. There is that setup there. So I can come here inside, I can say app controller. Can see it's available. I can say dot, I can get an instance and even invoke other methods that we want. For instance, the add to request that we saw before. Okay, so that's wonderful for the main reason that now we only have one and only one singleton or one instance of that one object that can be used everywhere or anywhere, I should say, in this project. All right, so we've done the basic setups here, okay? So next video, we're going to continue setting things up before we move forward and start looking at the user interface and all that great stuff. All right, I'll see you next.